How much should I spend on marketing is a really common question I get asked all the time. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a simple framework so you can work out what is the right amount of money that you should be investing in marketing for your business right now. And at the end of the video, there's a simple exercise that you can do right now for your business so that you can see exactly whether this is the right move for you to make or whether you should be holding back. The vast majority of businesses that I see aren't spending anywhere near enough on marketing, and that's because they're either scared to invest money they don't have, they've tried it once before, it didn't work, so there's just a blanket rule that marketing doesn't work for me, or they just really don't understand what investing in marketing could actually do for their business, how transformational it could be. So the question is like, how much should I spend? Is it 2%? Is it 5%? Is it 20%? What should we invest? And then honestly, it depends on the type of business that you have. And I think looking at a pie chart of the various costs in your business really helps you to identify that. So I'm just going to draw a simple pie chart here. If we imagine you're like a professional or a service-based business like a legal firm or a marketing firm or an engineering firm, you're going to spend the vast majority of your costs on your people, on your team cost. And then there's what's left over for the rent, the overheads, etc. If you're a construction type business, you're going to be spending like 80% of the cost on the materials, on the subbies, on the direct inputs for the jobs. And so it's understanding like where your business is already spending money, which is going to help dictate what's left over. What can we actually invest into marketing? So just having a blanket, what percentage should I spend, doesn't really work. You need to understand what your business actually looks like in terms of how much do you spend on cost of sales? How much do you spend on team? You need to understand the cost ratios of how your business makes money so that we can then understand, okay, where does marketing actually fit in this and what's left over? What can we be spending in marketing and not just applying a generic percentage to your business. So the easiest way to really see what marketing can do for your business visually is to take a look at a break-even chart for a business. So when we look at a break-even chart, what we're looking at is what are the fixed costs, what are the variable costs, what are my sales, and then we're identifying, right, where are we making losses, where do we break even, and where do we start making profit? So let's put the elements on the chart. First of all, we have our fixed cost. These are the costs which don't change regardless of your income. So think rent, overheads, core team. Regardless of whether you have a good month or a bad month, you're spending the same amount of money on your fixed costs. We then have our variable costs, which come on top of those. And variable costs, because they vary in direct proportion to whatever the income is. i.e., if you have a month which is 100K, you spend 30. If you have a month which is 200K, you'd spend 60. The variable costs move up and down in direct proportion to the income, so they move as a percentage. Then when we come into this break-even chart and we overlay sales onto the chart, what we can start to see is, first of all, it takes a period of time where the sales are below the fixed costs and variable costs added together. And this is the point where we're making losses up until there. And then you get that point where finally the sales become more than the fixed and variable costs added together. This is your break-even point. And from this point onwards, congratulations, you're into profit-making territory, which is great. Now, the thing I see with so many businesses is that they are trading at a point like this, where yes, the business is making profit, but it's actually making a really small profit margin compared to what it could. And it's once we kind of start to zoom in on this point of terms of what the profit is, and we take a look at, well, what if the business was actually doing more revenue, i.e. it was a little bit higher up the chart, and then we start to realize, wow, if we were turning over that much more, we would unlock so much more profit out of this business. And the real driver for that is that the fixed costs aren't changing. They're staying the same regardless of where the income is. And it's our variable costs that are actually only growing in a small proportion of the new income that's coming into the business. And hence we've been able to unlock so much more profit for that business. And what you can see by comparing the profitability of these two different lines, at this point here, the business is making a 5% margin. At this point here, the business might be making a 10% margin. The profit that we're making out of this business is a lot more because certain costs in the business aren't growing in proportion to the extra revenue. So we've been able to unlock significantly more profit by being just a little bit busier. And this is where marketing can play such a fundamental role for you in business, because it moves you from the first point to the second point where we're able to unlock more profit. So a really interesting story to show how this works in practice is when I reflect back on the first bar that we purchased. The bar that we purchased at the time, it was turning over $1.1 million, but it was losing 150K per year in terms of profitability, i.e. the costs were 1.25 million for 1.1 million worth of income. It took us 18 months to get that business to a break-even point, and we grew the business from 1.1 to 1.5 million. Costs at that point were 1.5 million, and we'd got ourselves to a position where the business was breaking even. Now, in reality, that was a hard slog. It was 18 months. It was us putting money into the business to keep it going. We were still finding our feet with what it looked like, but we'd finally got there. We'd got ourselves to the break-even point at 1.5 million revenue. It was then when we took a look at where we were going next, and we realized if the business could be doing another 500K worth of income, i.e. moving from 1.5 to $2 million, what would that extra 500K do for us? And it was at that point we realized, well, we wouldn't have to pay any extra rent, any extra insurance, any extra overheads. The team would basically stay the same. We'd already had the chef, we already had the front of house staff, and we came to realize, well, the bulk of that next 500K was going to be profit. After spending, say, 200K on the food and the drink and a little bit of extra staff, we were going to unlock an extra $300,000, and that would become our profit. And this was a move that moved us from being a break-even bar to a profitable bar, because what we did straight away, we went and engaged a marketing agency, gave them a budget for 100K a year to spend on marketing, because we made the guess or estimate if we spent 100K on marketing, we could unlock 500K of revenue. And ultimately, that's what transpired. And it moved this bar to be doing $2 million worth of income. Costs were now $1.8 million, including the marketing spend, including the cost of sales and a little bit of extra income. But finally, this bar had moved itself into a profit-making territory. And I'm sure we would have got there just through the slow organic method of we're offering a better product and people were finally coming in. But by spending marketing, we were able to accelerate the journey where we, back to our break-even chart, we were able to move ourselves from this break-even point to the point where we were making a 10% margin, thanks to our investment in marketing. And so if I reflect back on that moment, we weren't spending anything on marketing because at that time, we were very scared about spending money on anything. We were having to tip money into the bar just to keep it going. And so finally reaching a break-even point and then having a conversation of, hey guys, we should go and spend 100K on marketing was a pretty crazy thought. But it was in principle where we kind of had the moment where we realized it's almost like we almost couldn't afford not to spend on marketing because we needed to move the business on a little bit to unlock the profit that we actually wanted to make out of this business. Otherwise, it would have just been a continual slow journey to be able to maybe make profit along the way. Okay, so how do we get from a break-even chart to your actual numbers? And to do that, this is where my profit formula logic comes in again. So first of all, we need to have a little reminder that profit is the outcome of the formula, which is income minus expenses. Income is your clients paying you for the goods and services you provide. Expenses is the money you're spending to provide those goods and services. And obviously you're trying to get an arbitrage here where you're getting paid more for income than it's costing you to do it. And that difference between income and expenses is your profit. That's great. In theory, Gav, again, how does this relate to me? You've got to go one layer deeper, and that's where we find the opportunities for your business. That's where we see the specific numbers for your business, but it's where we're able to see what does marketing do for me? Where are the profit pockets hidden within my business that we can unlock? So by next layer deeper, I mean, let's take the income and split it into price and volume. i.e. what is the average price of a transaction versus how many times are you doing that transaction? Now, the volume metric will be different depending what business you're in. It'll look like deals or clients or members or builds or whatever it is, interchangeable words that mean volume in your business. So we need to look at that specifically because the volume metric helps us to see what would happen if we're a little bit busier. If we unlock more volume, where does that move us on a break-even chart? Then when we look at the expenses, I always split the expenses into 5 specific categories. There's the cost of sales, which is that variable percentage cost that moves in proportion to income. There is your team cost. There is your marketing investment, what we're talking about today. There is the rent or property costs, and there is the general overheads in your business. And it's being able to look at these 7 numbers where we're able to clearly see, okay, this is how my business currently makes money. And if I move to further up the chart, on the break-even chart, what will my business be making in terms of profitability at that point in time? And in particular, when you're just looking at income and expenses, the logic to make more profit looks like, well, either more income or less expenses, getting a bigger gap is how we stretch profit. But when you actually come down to this next layer down and looking at the 7 numbers that drive your business, it's where you start to realize actually more expenses, i.e. more investment into marketing activity unlocks significantly more volume in my business, and we've been able to stretch the profitability a lot more. So it's kind of counterintuitive. It's spending more on expenses, because they're not expenses, they're actually investments. It's spending more on that will unlock a greater income for your business. Again, so this is still really quite theoretical. I know it's numbers on a page, The simplest way to do this is I have a really basic tool. It's called the Profit Calculator. You can find it on my website or on my social media. It's a link anywhere you can see it to download a free copy for yourself. And it's the Profit Calculator tool, which helps you to easily put in these 7 numbers for your business and identify exactly where you are now. But then you can start to scenario plan and play around with the numbers and see, what will this do for me in terms of unlocking more profit in my business? So let's take a look at a profit calculator. This is a screenshot of one here, and we've got our 7 variables. So we've got our volume metric, we have our price metric, and so it's the price times volume. As volume grows, multiplied by the price, we're seeing what the different income would be for the business. And then we've got our 5 different types of costs written across the top here. So we've got our cost of sales, our team costs, marketing, overheads, and property. And we need to enter those. Are they a variable cost as a percentage, or are they a fixed cost? And by filling in the 7 numbers for your business, what you're able to see straight away is we're able to identify the point where your business is right now on this chart. And you want to set it up so that your business is somewhere in the middle here. This hypothetical example that I've got is a business that does $5,000 transactions. It's doing 16 of them a month, so that's $80,000 worth of income. And at the moment, it's making a 10% profit margin, $8,000. And we can see the costs across the page. We can see our cost of sales as a variable percentage are growing relative to income. And we can see the other costs in the business, the team, the overheads, and the property. These are fixed costs, and they're staying exactly the same all the way down the page. Now, this is the really common example I see with lots of businesses, where it's when we actually highlight where they're spending the money in these 5 different buckets, where we start to realize very often businesses aren't spending anything in the marketing column. And it starts to become, really obvious when you look at your profit formula like this, what some investments in the marketing column could actually do for you. In particular, I've set this example up so it highlights the point, but in particular, you could look at an example like this where we say, if we could move our business from doing 16 transactions per month to 20 transactions per month, and I'll just highlight the line across here, all of a sudden we could see how the business's income has grown. The fixed costs haven't changed, but the cost of sales have grown in direct proportion to the income as it's gone along. And what that's actually doing for us is we can see how much more profitable the business would be at that point. We've moved from a 10% margin to a 22% margin at this point in time. And so that's all still very hypothetical, but we're then able to ask the question, well, if we can see an extra 4 sales per month would more than double the profitability of the business, how can we get those extra 4 sales per month? And like I said, kind of becomes painstakingly obvious when we see we're spending nothing in the marketing column. Maybe some investments into our marketing will actually generate the extra volume we need, which unlocks significantly more profit. And you're actually able to look at the difference in profit that we're able to make, in this case, going from 8 to 22, i.e. an extra $12,000. If you're spending anywhere less than $12,000 on the marketing to unlock it, you're going to be winning. So you could, in this case, spend $1,000, $2,000, all the way up to $10,000 ultimately, and you're still better off. You're still ahead making the profit. And so let's say that investment costs $5,000 and we would have put $5K of marketing spend into our profit calculator. All of a sudden the profit isn't 22, it's 22 less the 5, so it's making 17K. But even so, 17,000 is still better off than the $8,000 where you started. And that's after paying for the marketing investment. And so this is what investments in marketing can do for you. This is how it, back to that break-even chart, this is how it moves you a little bit further on, and it's unlock that extra profit out of your business. Okay, so point number 3, this is that thought exercise where we're going to identify how much you should actually be spending on marketing in your business right now. So particularly if you're a business who's not spending anything on marketing as yet, this is a really great exercise to do. I love to start with the idea of spending 10% of your income on marketing. I know when I do this thought exercise to business owners, particularly my clients, like one of the first things they always say is like, I could never spend 10% on my income. I get it. I understand that. Let's just suspend those thoughts or limiting beliefs about could you do it or not. And instead we want to look at what would happen if I did. And so if you're a business which is turning over 100K and you're not spending anything on marketing as yet, 10% would look like investing $10,000 per month into marketing. And that's a decent marketing budget. That's $120,000 a year. What would you actually spend the money on? Would you spend it on ads? Would you spend it on hiring an internal marketing person? Would you spend it on sponsorship or PR or organic activity or emails? There's multiple different ways you could actually spend the money. And so it's a really great thought exercise to do, just to think about what would actually happen, because you need to know like how your business would work with more leads. And this is basically decides, should we be investing in marketing, yes or no? And If that doesn't look exciting at all, it looks like the business breaking, it can't handle it, we wouldn't actually make very much profit even if we did. This is great to identify because it means, okay, we've got some work to do on our business to be able to work out how we can actually grow our business from where it is anyhow. If on the other end of the scale, it looks like this is a no-brainer. If we put this much money into marketing and it unlocked a bunch of clients and we make more profit, then you start playing the exercise. What if I spend 20% on marketing, or what if I spend more? Like, this is really exciting. We can see we've got a vehicle that we can grow and scale. Let's invest in marketing to make that happen. Then we come back to the real world. And what is the limiting factor here? And the limiting factor is our cash flow, is our ability to actually invest that money. And this timely reminder for us again to realize that there is a difference between profit, which is income less expenses equals the profit of your business. And we're looking at this profit formula and we're identifying, if we grow and we put money into it and we unlock more profit, like that's super exciting. And what's ultimately different from that is actually your cash flow. And as I've talked about in previous videos, which you can find on my YouTube, it's so vitally important that you have a cash flow forecast for your business, because cash is very different from profit, largely just because of timing differences, the timing of when the profit you make actually lands in your bank account, and the different timing of expenses coming out of your account. You have things that are paid weekly, fortnightly, monthly, quarterly, and because of these different overlays, your bank balance, your cash flow is an absolute roller coaster ride. And it's so vitally important that you have a cash flow forecast, firstly, to make sure, one, we don't run out of money at any point in time. But secondly, having a cash flow forecast in place lets you see what cash do I have available to invest. And this is the real breakthrough with utilizing your cash flow forecast, because it's actually the tool that enables you to make confident decisions like, can we go and sign up for more marketing spend? How many months could we afford to invest $10,000 a month into marketing? How deep can we go before that starts generating leads coming back in? Because these kind of moves, particularly marketing, it's not like you turn it on Monday and the new clients appear on Tuesday. There's a lead time between when you start investing in marketing and that actually generates more people and they go through the journey of audience to leads to conversations and conversions and ultimately become paying clients. That takes time. And so this is where your cash flow forecast becomes vitally important for you to be able to answer the question confidently. I can handle this investment. This is a decision we should make right now. And how much can we do it? We can identify what is the appropriate amount as a percentage of business you should be spending, but it also needs to be an amount which is proportionate or safe for your business, from your cash flow, from your resources that you can actually afford to invest at that point in time. So to wrap this one all up, you don't need a generic spend. If you're hearing you should spend 5% or 10% or 20% on marketing, and if you're just blindly following that, you're guessing. What you actually need to know is, how does your business make profit? What would happen with extra clients and revenue coming into your business? Let's get confident about what marketing would actually do for your business with your specific numbers. And then most importantly, you need to understand, what can I actually afford to invest right now as well? So this is understanding your business's cash flow. So like I said, it's not about following a generic number. It's about knowing your numbers, understanding both your profitability and your cash flow, and making confident decisions about what you can invest in marketing right now.